It is so good to be up here for one final time at Highway. It was funny because initially I thought I was going to be my final time because we were moving, and then Steve dropped the bomb on us that, no, everybody's moving. So everybody's moving on. So I'm excited that I can be up here to give God's word one final time with you. I'm very honored that Pastor Steve and Missy asked me to do this. Especially this chapter, because this is a very meaty chapter. We got a lot of verses to go through today. I think Steve did that on purpose. Give him the long one, 40 verses, go. So we're gonna chug through it here. But yeah, I think I know everybody. But just in case, if you don't know me, my name is Eric. I am one of the pastors here at Highway. I'm excited to bring the word. Can we just give a round of applause to the people who are joining us online, really quick? We are grateful that we have technology that we can share God's message with you online. And if next 2 weeks, if you're ever in the Northwest Denver area, come on, get in while the getting's good. We got 2 more weeks after this week, so we would love to see us. So yeah, we are diving into chapter 11 of Hebrews. This entire summer we've been going through the book of Hebrews, usually one chapter at a time. I think we've had a week where we did 2. But we are in the meat of it, and I just have a question for everyone. Has God ever asked you to trust him with something you couldn't see? Yeah, pretty much all of us, I would say. Maybe you knew the next step. Maybe you didn't know where it would lead. But God has asked you to trust him in something that you couldn't see. Maybe you were waiting for an answer, right? Like you're praying, God, I need an answer to this, and it never really seemed to come. Or maybe you had your entire future planned out to the most minuscule detail, and then suddenly that plan changed. And then you find yourself asking, God, what are you doing? That's not what I had planned. Well, if you've ever asked that question or any version of that question, chapter 11 is your chapter. Okay? So, like I said, this summer we've been going through the book of Hebrews, and if you want to break down the book of Hebrews, basically chapters 1 through 10 is essentially just saying how Jesus is better than everything. For 10 chapters, the author's been answering this one question. Why is Jesus worth following? Well, because he's better. He's better than angels. He's better than Moses. He's better than any other high priest we've ever had. He's brought a better covenant. That's been founded on better promises. He's offered a better sacrifice of himself once and for all. He's opened a better way of living and a way into the presence of God. Over and over, Hebrews lifts our eyes away from everything temporary and fixes them on Jesus. And if you've been with us all summer, it's right there Jesus is better. The word is better. A better hope, a better covenant, right? A better promise. Now, that's chapters 1 through 10. Chapter 11, we continue that. We hear things like a better country or a better resurrection. And then finally, it's a little mysterious at the end of the chapter. He says something better. So a little tease for us. And that's not accidental. Hebrews has never been merely about surviving. It's about believing that what God has prepared is better than anything we are tempted to cling to today. So if chapters 1 through 10 answer the question, why is Jesus worth following? Chapter 11 answers, what does following him look like? Okay? So the believers who first received this letter from the author, we don't know who the author is. Some speculate that it's multiple authors. Some speculate that it was Paul. But we believe that that the author is left blank intentionally because it's not important about who wrote it. It's about what the meat of this letter entails. But the people who first received this letter needed to answer that question, what does following Jesus look like? They were tired. They had endured public ridicule, suffering. Some had lost property. Some were tempted to just kind of shrink back into the masses. and the ground beneath them felt like it was shifting, right? So the writer says, in effect, let me show you what faith looks like when you can't see the end. Okay? That's why I called this message today, Faith That Endures. So Hebrews 11 isn't just a collection of interesting stories. It's a picture of what enduring faith looks like. Okay? So I'm going to ask us to turn in our Bibles to Hebrews chapter 11. Whoa, almost dropped my Bible there. Good save. And we're going to read through 40 verses really quick. You remember the Micro Machines guy on TV if you were from the 80s? He spoke really fast. I don't think I can go that fast. But all right, let's dive into it. All right, verse 1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. Notice he said holy fear, not fear of the rain that was going to come, something that had never happened, but because God told him, hey, something's going to happen, need you to listen to me. And Noah, okay, yeah, all right, let's do it. By faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Verse 9, by faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him on the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. Verse 13, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things now that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Verse 16. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to call their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, notice a pattern forming here. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so, in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. The army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Verse 35, we're almost there. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in the deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. It's a handful of words there, but I think we got the gist of it there. So we're gonna end there. I hope everybody enjoyed it. We made time. All right. No, we're gonna dive into it. But before we do, this is something we do every week, and I just want you guys to repeat after me. I want to grow. God, you have more. I want to know it. All right, so what did you notice? I kind of mentioned it in there, but almost every paragraph starts the same way. By faith, by faith. 40 verses, one refrain. The author isn't giving us disconnected lessons here. He's showing us one faithful God through the lives of many ordinary people. So faith trusts God enough to obey him today because he will be faithful tomorrow. Okay? So today, I want you to notice something. Where does that sentence fall, what I just said? Faith is not faith in faith, right? Faith is not confidence in our confidence. It is biblical faith has an object. It has a character or characteristic, promise, and a faithfulness of God. So today I want to show us the 3 characteristics of enduring faith, okay? So what does enduring faith look like, essentially? And Hebrews 11 really dives in and answers that question. And the first characteristic is enduring faith trusts God's promises, okay? So we can kind of split chapter 11 into 3 parts. So in verses 1 through 16, I'm not going to read through them again. We just went through them. But it begins with, now faith is assurance of things hoped for, or proof of things not seen. Faith doesn't deny what is visible, right? It recognizes that there is something there, that we can see things with our own eyes. It simply refuses to believe that the visible is all that there is, right? So Abel couldn't see the verdict of God before he brought his offering, right? Enoch didn't see eternity before God took him away. Noah couldn't see the flood, couldn't even visualize what is rain. I'm gonna flood the earth with rain. What's that? Oh, you'll find out. Right? Abraham couldn't see the country of what God told him to leave for. And Sarah couldn't see the child that God had promised that she would one day hold. Yet, they lived as though God's promise was more dependable than their present circumstances. Sarah couldn't bear children. She was past childbearing age. Still had faith that God was going to provide her with a son. Abraham didn't know where he was going, still trusted God. And if we move ahead into verse 6 says that whoever comes to God must believe that he exists, right? And that he rewards those who seek him. So faith begins with the conviction that God is real, God is good, and that God keeps his word, right? So if we look at Abraham, Abraham is considered what? The father of faith, right? And he takes a huge spotlight in this chapter. And I say Abraham is the next step, but not the whole map, right? If you ever notice something strange about God's relationship with Abraham at the very beginning, is he's very blunt. He's very, like, not blunt, but more, he doesn't say a lot. He just says, hey, go. And Abraham follows. He doesn't give him turn-by-turn directions, right? He's not the GPS for Abraham. He just says, hey, I'm going to show you a country. I just need you to go. Okay, God, let's just go. All right. So Abraham had to decide in that moment, is what God telling me enough? And I think his answer was yes, because he just went. He just said, let's go. This is how God often works. This is what I need you all to understand, is that he's not going to give us the whole map. He's only going to give us each step as we need it next. He's not going to give us the 5-year plan that we all so desperately want. What's your 5-year plan? We hear that in job interviews all the time. What's your 5-year plan? I don't even know what next week looks like, okay? So how about we just focus on the next step, right? God gives us enough light for today, because if he were to give us everything, I think we would just be overwhelmed by what it is God has planned for us. So he gives us just enough to get us through the day so that we can have that faith take center stage. Faith, it's not walking after you know every detail, right? Steve talked about it this morning. He said, if you knew every detail, it's not faith. It's just, I know what's going to happen, so I'm just going to do it because I know the outcome. Faith is walking because you know God, because God has promised you, hey, I'm going to lead you through this. Okay, let's go. And then he's going to give you each step one at a time. So if we skip ahead to verse 10 tells us what Abraham could see by faith. It says, the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And he lived in tents, right? Abraham lived in tents because he believed God was building something permanent for him. So until he got there, what's the point of building something permanent? I'm just going to live in a tent, okay? He could hold the world loosely because he trusted the builder of a better one for him. Then verse 16 uses the word again. They were longing for a better country. Better country, a heavenly one. Their deepest hope was never merely a piece of land, right? It was life with God. Every smaller promise pointed towards something greater. Faith trusts God's promises even when we cannot see his plan. So, you know me, I like telling stories. So I'm going to tell you a story. And it's very near and dear to my heart. And it involves right now. And it involves my family. So over the last year or so, Danielle and I have really felt like God has been starting to call us away from Colorado and into the sunny humidity of Florida. And for a while, it's kind of been our dream to live. We're beach people. We're not mountain people. I'm sorry. We're in the wrong state. We're also Disney people too. So we want to go see the mouse. We want to go to the beach. So we're like, well, Florida sounds like a really nice place to live. I grew up in the South, so I'm used to humidity. Shocker, I prefer humidity over dry heat. I'm one of the weird ones. I lived so long in Las Vegas, and here I can't stand the oven that is the desert. So give me the humidity. I'll take the stickiness over the dry heat any day of the week. And Daisy's over there shaking her head. Nah. So there were times when the dream came back to the surface, and I thought, maybe now's the time. So about a little over a year ago, my company purchased another company, and it was like a reverse acquisition. So while my company bought this company, all of their executives and leadership became our leadership. So they have a headquarters out in Melbourne, Florida, which is on the Space Coast on the Atlantic side. And when that acquisition happened, I got moved onto a team they're all based in that Florida office, which is kind of interesting that you would move me on a team that's 2,000 miles away. So one of the things I had to do is I had to fly out to Melbourne. I had to meet everybody on the team and just kind of get to know them. And while I was there, my director at the time, he's now my VP, was very adamant about, hey, if you don't want to work in Colorado and you want to work in Florida, you can just come work here. I don't care which office people work at. I just want them to work where they want to work. And so it was sort of this idea of, hey, maybe we can move to Florida. And this is last May. So I come back, I have a conversation with Steve about this, and hey, they kind of insinuated that they want me to move out there, but it's my choice, so we're going to see what happens. And then nothing happened. And nothing happened really because I was sort of trying to push the envelope there. I was sort of trying to make it happen on my own. You know, I started looking at houses. I'm on Zillow, like, okay, where can we afford to live? Where it's, oh, that's a nice house. That's a nice house. Like, I'm going to move in 3 weeks. Not realizing that moving is a process, especially when you have kids and you've collected a lot of stuff over the years after living in Colorado for 13, 14 years. We have a lot of stuff. So we're trying to get rid of stuff. We're trying to pack us stuff. So moving is a very arduous process, right? So I had told my boss at the time, hey, I'm moving to Florida. And he's like, okay, we'll revisit that. And every few months, he kept asking me, how's the process? And finally, it was this May, he asked me, so, like, where are you at in the process? And it was at that time I had made this decision, I need to stop pushing for this. I felt like God was telling me, hey, you're here right now, so be here right now. And so I just let it go. I surrendered Florida to God. I said, okay, God, if this is where you need me to be, you need my family to be, I want to be here, and I want to be here 100%. So he asks me, and I said, that's dead in the water. It's dead in the water. And I start living like Colorado is where home is, right? May not feel like home right now, but this is where home is right now. And then something happened. Daniela, my wife, who works for the University of Colorado, her job gave her permission to work fully remote, which is something we had been praying into for a while, not just so we could move, but because she wanted to be home with kids. And then, all of a sudden, this idea of, hey, we can move to Florida starts percolating. And then all of a sudden we start talking to a realtor, and she's like, yeah, you could get all this equity for your house. We'll get it sold, this, that. These things start moving, and I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of standing still while everything's happening. And all I remember thinking is I literally told my boss 2 weeks ago that this was dead in the water. And now I have to go to him and say, hey, remember how I said this was dead in the water? Now it's like a rushing river that's pushing me away. So I did that. This is like the day after my birthday. So I turned 40, and then I go into work the next day. I was like, so I am moving, apparently, and we need to talk about what that transition looks like. And he's like, cool, let me just make sure it's still okay with Drew, our VP, and we'll sign off. And literally like a day later, they're like, you're good. Okay, great. So it's not that I stopped caring about moving to Florida. It's that I stopped trying to control the outcome. And the moment I surrendered that timeline, that's when God stepped in and was like, you're being faithful. to me. I've told you, like, this is a desire of yours. This is something that I've told you, like, is going to happen. So we're going to make it happen in the time that I see fit, right? So now I need everybody to understand something really quick. Just because this happened to me doesn't mean it's going to happen for everybody. I'm not saying faith means everything works out exactly how we imagine it'll work out. Hebrews 11 doesn't say that. I'm just saying that faith means trusting God's timing is better than our own, right? So I know where we're headed geographically. Do I know every detail of what life will look like when we get there? Absolutely not. There's still a lot of unknown because we have to sell our house first before we can buy a house, and that's kind of a tricky situation because it's like we need a place to live before we can. So we have to sell the house. We don't have a home. Then we got to buy a house but we don't have a place to live. So what does that look? So I've got all these things going on in my head. So faith does not require seeing the future. It just requires knowing the one who holds the future in his hands. So question I have for you all today is, where are you trying to force something in your lives today? Is it a relationship? Is it a job? Career decision maybe? Family situation? Is it healing? Ministry? An answer about what comes next maybe? We're in a time of transition in Highway, so surrendering that is important. It's not indifference. Surrender is not indifference. It's just placing what matters most into the hands of the one who is the most trustworthy. It's praying, God, I will take the next step you give me, and I will trust you with every step you have not yet shown me. Say it again. I will take the step you give me, and I will trust you with every step you have not yet shown me. So faith begins with trusting, right? But biblical trust never stays in our heads, okay? Trusting God's promise leads us to obeying God's leading, and that is the second characteristic of enduring faith. It obeys God's leading. So we had the first section of Hebrews talking about trusting God. Now we have the second section, which is about obeying God's leading, and that starts in verse 17, goes through verse 31 or 32, right? So it says in those verses we get a bunch of stories. This is where the author gets to sit down and write about all these amazing people of faith. And if you read through it again, every story in this section involves a decision. No one drifts into faith, guys. No one just decides one day, this looks like good. Oh, I'm faithful now. No, it's a decision. It's something that you have to do. You have to obey God's leading there. No one accidentally obeys God. Each person reaches a crossroads and must decide, will I trust God or will I trust myself? Oftentimes we do the latter. We trust ourselves because I know me. I can see me. I know the decisions that I make. I can see the outcome, so I'm going to trust myself. And what usually happens is a really bumpy road. Whereas if we were to just trust God, we don't know the outcome. No, we don't know step 10, but we know step 1, and we know it's God. Faith obeys God's voice before it understands God's reasons. Okay? Going back to Abraham, father of faith, and his son Isaac. This is a fun story. We're talking about God telling Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, his one and only son through Sarah, Isaac, as an offering. God asks Abraham to offer Isaac. This is the son he had promised him, the son through whom he said a nation would be born. So this command doesn't make sense, right? God, you promised me the son. You delivered on that promise. Now you're saying he's going to be through him the nation is going to come. You said my descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sands on the sea, and it's through Isaac. And now you're telling me to sacrifice him, right? So from a real world perspective, that doesn't make sense. That's contradictory, as the non-believers would say. Well, why would God promise him a son and then tell him to kill him? It's contradictory. But verse 19 tells us that Abraham reasoned. So you want to talk about getting worldly and secular, reasoning is a very worldly view. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead. So he's like, well, he's the God of everything. He can do anything. So he could raise the dead. So I could sacrifice Isaac, and he'll just raise him from the dead. And I'll have my son back. And then that promise of the nation being through Isaac can still be fulfilled. So this is Abraham reasoning through it. I mean, I don't know how God will keep his promise, but, I mean, he can do anything. So I don't know how he can do it, but I know that he will keep his promise because he said so. And he is God. He never lies. He will always keep his promise. So Abraham didn't act because he understood the plan. He acted because he trusted God's character. He obeyed what God commanded him to do. So he gets the knife and he ties up his... People like to think that Isaac was this little baby boy or a little adolescent. No, this is a grown man. So that took a lot of faith on Isaac's part too. So we talk about the faith of Abraham. It was the faith in Isaac that God will provide a sacrifice. So he ties him up, puts him on the altar, and he's just like, okay, God, anytime now. Here we go. He's got the knife. He's got the knife. He's got the knife. Anyway, it's a crucial difference, though. Like, faith isn't understanding everything God is doing, right? Faith is knowing that God, the God who leads us, cannot contradict the God who has promised something to us. So it's not contradictory because we know that God can do anything, and God can still fulfill his promise. Second thing about obedience is that, sometimes obedience is going to take over our comfort. And Moses is a perfect example of that. He's born into these circumstances, and ends up, living in the palace of Pharaoh's daughter, life of luxury, and he chooses to obey God, though. He chooses not to chase, power or influence or wealth or even security. I mean, he is an Israelite, and he's part of that, that flock that was supposed to be put to death, and yet he chose to embrace his heritage. In verse 24, it says that he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Verse 25 says he chose mistreatment with God's people rather than fleeting pleasures of sin, right? He didn't want to be known as the lucky one, the one that got spared because, he just lucked out. He wanted to be considered part of his people. He exchanged a palace for identification with slaves. Why? Well, verse 26 says he was looking to the reward. Moses could see beyond what Egypt offered. Egypt offered great things at the time. They offered luxury. It offered power and prestige. He chose eternity over temporary comfort. And the reproach of Christ over the treasures of Pharaoh. So faith isn't passive agreement. It's not, I have faith. No, faith chooses. Faith moves. Faith does the next thing God says, even when obedience costs us something. I mean, Rahab is one of my favorite characters in this chapter. So she represents something that all of us can relate to. She's a Gentile. She's a prostitute, an outsider. She's a woman whose past could have convinced her that she did not belong among God's people. How many of us can relate that we don't belong? Yet her name is in here because she trusted Israel's God enough to act. She hid the spies. She welcomed the spies, risking her life. She hid the spies in her home, even when guards were going around like, hey, spies are here. Are they here? Are they here? She's no, they're not. I'll hide them for God, for this God of Israel. So if you're thinking to yourself, I have failed too much, or I am too broken, God could never use me, Rahab's name in this chapter says otherwise. Faith is not reserved for perfect people. It's for people who trust a perfect God. God did not build his kingdom with flawless people. He builds it with surrendered hearts. And I mean, our theme for the year has been doers of the word, builders of the kingdom, right? And that is why Hebrews 11 fits that theme so well, is that he's asking us to be doers of his word, builders of his kingdom. We're not perfect. We're not born perfect, but we can strive for perfection. We can strive to be like Jesus and obey God and have faith in him. And that, in turn, will build his kingdom. These people that are mentioned don't merely believe ideas. Their faith moved into their hands. Noah built an ark. Abraham built altars. Moses helped build a nation. Rahab's obedience became part of the line through which Jesus would come. Okay? Faith always builds something because living faith always acts. So nobody in Hebrews 11 completed the whole kingdom project. Each person simply laid a stone. Noah never saw Israel. Abraham never saw descendants as numerous as the stars. Moses led Israel toward the land, but Joshua is the one that took them in. David desired the temple. Solomon is the one who built it. The prophets announced the Messiah, but he came in a later generation. Kingdom building has always been a multi-generational thing. We are not asked to finish everything. We're asked to be faithful with the stone God has placed in our hands. So that's the reason why I've appreciated, oh man, I'm getting emotional already. That's the reason why I've appreciated watching Pastor Steve and Missy in this season. Thanks, Sean. We're gonna put these back here because I'm not gonna use them. No, I'm just gonna let them flow. In this season, I've really appreciated watching the way Pastor Steve and Missy have handled everything. What I've seen is not people pretending to have every answer. What I've seen is a willingness to say, we believe God is leading us, and we're going to obey and take the next step. I'm talking directly to them right now, so I'm not going to look everywhere else. They've spent years faithfully laying stones in God's kingdom here in Colorado, first in Boulder, now in Broomfield and in northwest Denver. And now God is leading them to lay stones elsewhere in another assignment. Faith often means holding our plans not like this, but like this, with open hands. Sometimes God says, stay. Sometimes he says, go. The common denominator is not the destination. It's the obedience. For the longest time, God was saying, stay, 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 and you were obedient. Now he's saying, go. And you're being obedient. Thank you for being an example of what it means to obey God. And it's not only about our pastors, God may not be calling you to lead a church or move across the country or anything like that. But he is calling every believer to obedience. The question isn't, what is God asking someone else to do? The question is, what is God asking me to do? So maybe the next word is go. Maybe it's stay. Maybe it's forgive, serve, speak, wait. Ooh, that's a tough one, wait. Sometimes obedience means action. Sometimes obedience means refusing to run ahead. God usually does not reveal step 10, like I said, before we take step 1. Faith is not proven by what we believe. Faith is revealed by what we are willing to obey. So if Hebrews ended here, at verse 31, we might assume that faith always produces the outcome we want. But the writer keeps writing, as writers tend to do, and the emotional tone changes completely. And that brings us to our third characteristic of enduring faith, and that is that enduring faith perseveres through God's plan. So, the last section of this chapter, the last 8 verses, verses 32 through 40, beginning in verse 32, the writer almost sounds out of breath. He says, what more shall I say? I don't have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets. Through faith they conquered kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched fire, escaped the sword, found strength in weakness, became mighty in battle, and received their dead by resurrection. We love those verses. Those are feel-good verses. We teach these stories to our children. Daniel in the lion's den, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're victories that we can celebrate. And if the chapter stopped there, we might draw a dangerous conclusion, which is if I have enough faith, God will always rescue me, heal me, and provide exactly what I hoped for and remove the hardship. But then the writer goes on and says, others were tortured. Others refused release. Others endured mocking, chains, and imprisonment. Others were stoned, sawed in two, killed by the sword. Real buzzkill, God. Others wandered in deserts and in mountains and caves, and they lived in holes in the ground. They are mentioned here because they had the same faith, but a different outcome. The people who stopped the mouths of lions and the people who died by the sword are the same in this chapter. People who conquered kingdoms and the people who lost everything were all commended by God. They had favor with God and got to see eternity with Him. Faithfulness is more important than a favorable outcome. Okay? Because what is this life but temporary? We naturally, as humans, we evaluate life by results. We are results-driven people. If everything's going well, we assumed what? We're blessed. #blessed. If everything is falling apart, we wonder, where did I go wrong? Where did I fail? Now, Hebrews says outcomes are not a reliable scoreboard for faith, okay? Sometimes faith looks like Daniel walking out of that lion's den. Sometimes faith looks like a nameless saint refusing to deny God even when deliverance doesn't come. One of my favorite books is by if you ever heard of a 90s Christian band called DC Talk. They have a song called Jesus Freaks. And they wrote a book called Jesus Freaks, and it's a testimony of all these modern day, not just modern day, but historical martyrs, people who died for their faith. And it's a very sobering thing because these are people who had faith and still died, not seeing the finish line. But it also brings into perspective that, like I said, faith is not what we can keep score with. It's not something that we can say, oh, I had faith, so everything's going to work out the way I intended it to in this life. Verse 38 of Hebrews says that the world was not worthy of them. The world was not worthy of them. They had so much faith, and God took them back. The world saw people who were homeless, or who were rejected, who were afflicted and forgotten, and God saw treasure. Church, don't let the world define success for you. God has a different scoreboard. Verses 39 and 40 say, all of them were commended, yet they did not receive the fullness of the promise because God had provided something better. That mysterious something. What is it? Some did receive promises. Abraham got to hold Isaac. Israel entered the land. David became king. But every promise pointed beyond itself to Christ and to God's final redemption. They lived and died trusting God for something bigger than themselves. They laid their stones faithfully. They handed the work to another generation faithfully. And God joined their unfinished stories to ours in Jesus. So even in this season, we have an opportunity to live out the very faith Hebrews 11 describes. Trusting God with what we cannot yet see, obeying His leading, and believing that He is still writing a better story. In the same way that this building, this church may close, but the God who has been faithful here is not staying behind. His kingdom is still advancing. Our assignment may change. Our assignment to Florida, there's North Carolina. Yours may be here in Colorado still. But our King does not ever change. He does never change. He does never. Hebrews 11 reminds us that God's work has never been confined to one place. The men and women of faith faithfully laid their stones, trusted God with what they couldn't finish, and handed His work to the next generation. It's okay to grieve. In 2 weeks, we're going to have our last service here, and we're going to celebrate. We're going to have sweet cow, ice cream, and it's going to be bittersweet because it's the end of something, but the beginning of something else. This building, this church, I keep saying building. We haven't been here the whole time, but this church, it's where some of us may have met Jesus. It's where we've all worshiped together. It's where we watched our families grow. And it's where we've also experienced God's faithfulness. So, this is where the recurring word of our entire book comes. Better. It becomes more than just a sermon series observation. It becomes hope. The people in the first half of this chapter, they desired what? A better country, right? Abraham, he wanted to experience that. Moses wanted to get his people into a better land. Noah. The sufferers in the second half, they looked for a better resurrection. And verse 40 says God had planned something better. Their circumstances didn't always improve, but their God never became less trustworthy. Hebrews isn't asking us to pretend loss doesn't hurt. It's asking us to believe that loss doesn't get the final word. God does. Because of Jesus, there is a better country. There is a better resurrection and a finished redemption waiting for everyone who belongs to Him. The chapter division can make us stop too soon as well. Because if we were to end here today, at the end of chapter 11, I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice. Because in between chapters 11 and 12, it kind of gives us our next step. And I told Matthew I'm stepping on his sermon next week. Because we're gonna read the first 2 verses of chapter 12. And it is our theme. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before Him, He endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The witnesses of chapter 11 are not the finish line. Jesus is. Their lives testify that God is faithful. Just look at Abel, and Noah, and Abraham, and Sarah, and Moses, and Rahab, and the prophets, the unnamed saints. Their stories say God can be trusted, and then the writer says, therefore, run. But don't run while staring at them. Run looking to Jesus. Jesus is not simply another name in the hall of faith. We call this the hall of faith. He's not just another name. He's the one every person in Hebrews 11 was waiting for. They trusted the promise, and we know the promised one. They looked forward to the cross while we get to look back at it. They ran toward what they could only glimpse, and we follow the one who has already endured, conquered, and sat down at the right hand of God. Jesus is the founder and perfecter of our faith. He begins what we cannot begin. He finishes what we cannot finish. The weight of our hope is not resting on the strength of our faith. It rests on the faithfulness of our Savior. Go ahead and stand. Go ahead and stand. I've just got to, I want to dock the boat here, land the plane. I just have a few questions I would need to ask you. These are all rhetorical. These are all internal. I'm not going to ask for hands. But I want you to really reflect. Where is God asking you to trust Him? That might be your Abraham moment. The place where you can't see the whole map. Where is God asking you to obey Him? That might be your Moses moment, your Rahab moment. The next step that costs you some comfort or courage. Finally, where is God asking you to persevere? And that might be your unnamed saint moment. Faithfulness when you don't receive the outcome you wanted. I remember I applied to so many jobs, had interviews, and God was, no, that's not it. That's not what I have for you. Even though that's what I wanted. It's not the outcome I wanted. Why? Because God had more for me. He had something better for me. So I took a step back, obedient, and I persevered. I'm still persevering. Whether you're staying or going, whether you're grieving, waiting, or celebrating, take the next step faithfully. Lay aside the weight that comes with it too, and refuse to shrink back, and keep running, keep building, keep looking to Jesus. When we read Hebrews 11, it's easy to admire the faith of Abraham and the courage of Moses and the obedience of Noah. But that is not the point. They aren't the point. The point is that God is trustworthy. Abel trusted Him. Abraham trusted Him. Moses trusted Him. Not because they always understood Him, and not because every story ended the way they hoped, but because God had proved Himself faithful. Church, the same God who carried them has carried Highway Community Church. The same God who walked with Abraham has walked with us. The same God who led Moses still leads His people. The same God who was faithful yesterday will be faithful tomorrow. The people in Hebrews 11 didn't know how all their stories would end, and neither do we. But they knew the God who was writing the story. And so do we. So live by faith because God has always been faithful. Let's pray. Father God, we thank You that You are the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. You're the founder and perfecter of our faith. and that you are trustworthy. God, I thank you for this time we have had in this season together. And God, I pray right now that the next step that each of us has to take, we would trust you and be obedient to you and take it. And that no matter what may come, we would persevere through it, good and bad. That we can show you that we have faith in you, God. Just like you show us that we can trust you in every aspect of our lives. God, I thank you for everything you have given this church. I praise you. Can't wait for what comes next. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Did you guys get something out of today? Well, one quick announcement. We got a couple of weeks left here. So next week, Pastor Matthew's going to bring chapter 12. He's going to bring it hard. We'll be without the Crowders as they go take a much-needed break and also just go scout houses. So we'll miss them, but they'll be back for our final week here on the 30th, where we're going to have our last service, and we're going to have a baptism and baby dedication. So if that is something that you are interested in, if you've never been baptized and you want to be baptized, the more the merrier. If you have a baby that wants to be dedicated, we'd love to dedicate them. And then afterwards, like I said, we're going to have some ice cream. And we're just going to fellowship, and we're going to close Highway on a high note. We're all going to sing in a very high note. And we're going to see what God has next for each and every one of us. So I bless you all this week. Before you leave, give someone a hug. Tell them you love them. Y'all are dismissed.
Thank you for watching the Highway YouTube channel. We trust that God spoke to you right where you are. Please take the time to hit the subscribe button to follow us each week, and be sure to share it with a friend. You can support the ministry by heading over to our church website at highwaycommunity.com. Look for the Donate tab and help us to continue to reach our world with the love of Jesus Christ. Thank you again for watching. God bless, and have a wonderful week.